The following program is brought to you by TZ Productions, celebrating KPTS's nearly 50 years of community support in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
Support also comes from viewers like you. Thank you.
The best guests and the best conversations are right here. It's a show unlike any other on Kansas television. And this week, we get up close and personal with a former Second Lady of Kansas. She's known for her public service and devotion to education and the disadvantaged. Anyone well-versed on Kansas politics knows the name Docking. Robert Docking was governor in the late 60s and early 70s. His son, Tom, was lieutenant governor in the mid-80s. And Tom's wife is Jill. She's been a political dynamo in her own right, one of the most prominent women in the Kansas Democratic Party. After serving as Second Lady, Jill ran for the U.S. Senate in 1996, losing to Sam Brownback. Then in 2014, Mrs. Docking came within a couple of points of becoming lieutenant governor of the state of Kansas, narrowly losing the general election. Meanwhile, for decades, Docking has served on numerous local and state commissions, boards, and she's been active in numerous political and charitable causes. Now, still dealing with the recent loss of her husband, Jill Docking is here to reflect on the challenges and triumphs of her life. We'll also try to find out what's next for this political power player and community servant, and we'll get her thoughts on the current political climate in both Washington and Topeka. It's time to go one-on-one. Stay with us. I'm so glad you could join us. I'm Victor Hogstrom, delighted to welcome Jill Docking to the program. And thank you for joining us.
Of course.
It's a pleasure to have you.
And it's a pleasure to be here.
You know, I think all of Kansas is still mourning the loss of your husband. How are you doing?
You. Well, very difficult. Very difficult.
I can imagine.
I mean, I've been with Tom since I was 16. And I'm 62, so I haven't had a life without Tom, really. But I'm fortunate to have terrific children and family members and an incredible group of friends. So I've been blessed with a lot of support. But it's a deep hole to climb out of.
Again, my condolences.
Thank you.
How did you and Tom meet?
Well, Tom and I met when I was 16 and he was just turning 18 on a trip to Durham, England. American Institute for Foreign Study used to be a group in high school that would take high school kids and you get a little bit of college credit. And we met in England, and then Tom used to tell this, our first date was a boat ride down the Seine River, which was a pretty romantic way to go out with somebody the first time. And then I'm from Massachusetts and he's from Kansas, so we had a long-distance relationship for a long time. He would come back in the summer and work for my father, who was an Anheuser-Busch distributor, so he would drive trucks in Massachusetts. So anyway, he's a wonderful husband and father, and terrible loss for us.
Now, was it challenging, a New Englander meeting someone from the Midwest?
It was pretty different. I went to a very Eastern school. He went to the University of Kansas. It was a very difficult time. I started college in 1973, so as you recall, it was the Vietnam War and protest, and I think they had burned the student union even in Kansas, but it was a rocking time to go to school, so I found it a lot quieter in Kansas than it was in Rhode Island, where I went to school. Anyway.
You attended Brown.
I went to Brown, and Tom came a semester to Brown, and then I went to KU supposedly for a year. And then I wanted to transfer, and my father said, "You're not transferring. There's no way." He went to Brown.
Right.
And so the person who was most interested in my transferring was a guy named Bob Docking, who was then governor of the state of Kansas. So I said to my father, "I think you're being unreasonable. Would it be possible for you and Mom to come out and go to my classes with me? And if you don't think I'm getting as fine an education at the University of Kansas, I promise I'll go back to Brown without asking any other questions." And they did that. They came to all my classes, and he was convinced, although I have to tell you, one evening my father-in-law and the chancellor, Archie Dykes at the University of Kansas, took my father out for dinner. And that seemed to do the trick.
So
it was a pretty effective lobbying group.
So they knew what was going on.
Yes, right. So, no, they were trying to talk my father into letting me stay.
Right.
And then he did let me stay.
But for a reason.
The reason was he had a lobbying group helping him.
Right.
He really wanted me to go back to Brown and graduate, and then if Tom and I wanted to get married, we would. There was a rule in our family, you couldn't get married till you graduated from college and you were at least 21, and nobody got to bypass that rule. So when I turned 21 and graduated from college, Tom and I got married.
So when you were in college, what were your dreams? Because they must have apparently changed a little bit when you moved to Kansas. What were you thinking as that?
I don't think they changed when I moved to Kansas. I really wanted to get a PhD in either history or English and teach at a university was what I preferred to do. And that was another Bob Docking story. He took me aside and said, "PhDs are a dime a dozen. I think you'd be really good at business. You ought to go to business school." And by the time he was done with me, I thought it was my idea. It wasn't my idea, it was his idea. And he was pretty astute. I think I have loved being in business, and I think he thought I'd be pretty good at business, and so he talked me into going to business school. So I got an MBA at the University of Kansas.
And with that MBA, you could do a whole lot of things with it, but you decided to become an investment broker.
I did. Yeah.
Why is that?
So I got my MBA, and then I was actually a stay-at-home mom for almost 10 years. And I went to school with a young man named Stuart Kowalski, and his father, Jack Kowalski, was the head of A.G. Edwards in Wichita, which is a brokerage firm. And every year, Jack would call me and say, "I think you'd be really good at this business and you would love it." And every year I'd say, "I just think the kids are too little. I need to be home with the kids." And after a couple years, he said, "Now listen, I know your youngest child's in school full time, so at least come and try this." And so I didn't really think I'd do it forever, but I love what I do. I love business. I didn't really like studying business, but I love being in business.
So when you settled in Kansas, and after a few years of living here, your husband became lieutenant governor.
He did. He was very young. I mean, we were barely out of graduate school when John Carlin asked him to be on the ticket for his second term. So it was pretty exciting and busy for that period of time.
So what was the quality or the attraction that the governor saw?
Now, I'm certainly not objective, but I thought Tom Docking was one of the most remarkable individuals I knew. He was incredibly smart. He was completely devoted to this state in terms of just a family history of Bob Docking was governor and his grandfather was governor, and he just had a public service interest and devotion, and he was young and handsome and good at campaigning. You know, he'd grown up in a family that was pretty political, so I think that's what John Carlin found attractive. And generally in a gubernatorial ticket, you're trying to balance geography, and we were living in Wichita, so you'll notice people looking at that geography on a ticket, and that was what happened. And then he ran for governor, and he was lost to Mike Hayden, but that was pretty soon after that. Then we settled down to a pretty normal life.
So what were those days like?
In politics?
Yes, in politics and as the wife of a lieutenant governor.
Well, The lieutenant governor plays whatever role the lieutenant governor and the governor decide that person should play. Jeff Collier, of course, has been healthcare because he's a doctor. In Tom's case, he was a lawyer who specialized in tax planning. So Tom's job was to analyze the tax structure we have and come out with a recommendation. As far as my role, I mean, I did a lot of campaigning for each of their runs, but I was pregnant during the middle of all of that stuff, so I was busy too at home raising kids. So I think my role basically at that time, other than doing some of the ceremonial stuff, was to be a mom. But when he ran for governor, of course, I really needed to kick in campaigning with him because that was a long campaigning time.
And did you have any political ambition at that time?
I don't think I did at that time. I mean, as you know, I ran for the Senate in 1996, and my ambitions were probably different at that point because they were more federalized at that point. And then when I ran with Paul Davis, my interest was helping Paul because I think my job now is not to run for public office anymore, but to mentor people who are. Okay. And I thought I could help Paul with that campaign. And I was disturbed to see what's happening to the state of Kansas. If you look at the history of Kansas, even though we've had many Democrats and Republicans, they've all, in my opinion, largely been centrist in their own party. And they largely shared the same values. They tried to be fiscally conservative and responsible and make sure we had enough money and behind our roads and our schools and our med center and our infrastructure in the state of Kansas. And no shock to you, I don't agree with the way Governor Brownback handled it. And I think what they've done is essentially robbed all of our safety net in the state of Kansas. Now they're going to have to return to a normal tax structure. I don't care what they say now, they're eventually moving in that direction. But the argument that it spurs economic growth is a argument perfect in a utopia. We just don't happen to live in a utopia. There's nobody more business oriented than I am. I understand the stimulus and I understand what Donald Trump's trying to do. But what you end up doing is either costing the educational system and the infrastructure system, or in the case of the president, because they don't have a balanced budget amendment, they'll increase the deficit with what they're doing.
So, with your background running for the position of lieutenant governor and running for
U.S. Senate,
U.S. Senate, and being the wife of a lieutenant governor, looking at the state today, if you were to make any 1, 2, or 3 major changes, what would they be?
I would have a centrist governor. That would help. Obviously, I'm a Democrat, so I hope and will work hard to make sure a Democrat is governor. But there are many Republicans running who I think are centrist Republicans, and we have a tradition of that. That is the big change I would make. The nature of the House and State Senate is already beginning to change because people are understanding what's happening. I mean, you have people who, like Mark Hutton, who originally sort of thought it was a good idea, but had the honor and integrity to say, not such a good idea, we need to not be doing this, which I have respect for, by the way. You know, not everybody can be right all the time. So anyway, I hope we move to the middle in the state of Kansas and renew energy to all the things I think are important for the state.
That's one. Any other?
Well, that was sort of a mouthful, wasn't it?
Well, it was.
You know, I have an interest in higher education, as you know, because I've been a regent. And I still would like to focus on that. I think Kansas has an extraordinary system of higher education that is very attractive to not only Kansans, but people from around the country and around the world. We have a large international participation in higher ed. I'm particularly interested in the med school. I'm on that board in Wichita and on expanding what we do down here in Wichita. I love what's happening to Wichita. Tom Docking 30 years ago decided to focus on developing downtown Wichita. And before Tom died, our daughter was getting married this summer, and I was downtown doing some stuff and kind of complaining I had to walk maybe a quarter of a mile to get to one of these shops, and he said, well, why? I said, there's a taco festival and there are millions of cars down here with carriages, and he goes, that's perfect, because he wanted that youth to return to Wichita. Wow. But unless you have good school systems and good hospitals and good docks, people aren't going to come. So we need to invest in those again. Right. That's two. Do I have to name a third thing?
No, not necessarily. But I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Though. What is it like being a Democrat in one of the most Republican states in the country?
Well, I think it's harder now because our state moved in another direction over the last 8 years. I'd never found it particularly difficult when we were a state of what I consider more centrist, Democrats and Republicans. We took a tack to the right, and I think we're coming back to the middle, and like all of those things. But it's hard to win elections, and you have to tack to the middle to win elections. You can't have, in my opinion, you can have far right here. It's a lot harder to run on way to the left here. So I don't know. I love Kansas. I'm sorry we didn't win the last election, but it's not going to stop me from working really hard for stuff I believe in.
Now you have children, two kids that you mentioned.
2 kids, yeah.
Are they politically active with political aspirations?
I don't know that either. Our son is my business partner in the investment business and exceptionally talented at that, and I think he wants to stay doing that. And our daughter lives in Colorado and is getting a master's in public policy, actually. So I don't know that they want to run for public office. They had a lot of it. In fact, they had a belly full of it.
We normally play a game on this program.
Okay.
And before we continue with our conversation, I'd like to pause and give you
Play
a
the
breather.
game?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let you have a sip of your good coffee out of a KPTS coffee mug. And doesn't
And the very scenic part of the cup here,
yes.
everybody sees?
Yes. Yeah. So let's play this game.
Okay.
I'll start a sentence and you finish it.
Got it.
All right. The best thing about the Democratic Party is?
Energy and values. I mean, I am a proud Democrat, and I believe in what our party stands for, and I like their energy.
The best thing about the Republican Party is?
There are many, many people I know in the Republican Party who are very devoted to the state of Kansas, and once the election's over, they work really hard to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So I have admiration for many, many leaders in the Republican Party.
The best thing about motherhood is?
Everything. I love being a mom. But, the frosting on the cake are those grandbabies. You know that, right? I mean, I have wonderful children, but we have 2 grandchildren, and it's terrifically fun to go to all the grandma events and the events at school. So I think motherhood, I mean, in the end, I think you're measured by your kids and your grandkids.
The worst thing about motherhood is?
Well, well, okay. Ages 11 to 14. I remember, somehow I wasn't as impatient with our son as our daughter, but I remember saying to my daughter once, really the only reason you're alive is your dad, because I was going to crawl across the dinner table and strangle you. So I guess the toughest years are those kind of prepubescent teenage years. But you know what? They make up for it. I have a fabulous daughter who's just delightful. But those are tough years, the middle school years.
The best age in life is?
Today.
Today. The most fun I've ever had is?
I've really had a lot of fun my whole life. I've had to think about that since losing Tom. You know, I've had an extraordinarily blessed life.
If I could be a fly on the wall somewhere, it would be.
The White House.
I could have guessed you saying that.
That would be fun.
If I could live my life over again, I would.
Live it just the same.
The same, no
Yeah,
change.
no. I mean, if I could change something, I would have my husband back. Do you know that? So,
Right.
I don't know. Fortunately, Tom and I appreciated what we had all the time we had it. Felt very blessed and tried to give back to the community because of those blessings. But I can't think of what I'd change.
What have you learned about life, Jill, in the past years?
Well, I've learned about the grief process. I've never gone through this. And I guess I've learned that I just have to come out the other side of it.
What is next for Jill Docking?
I don't know. I'm not going to stop living. I have kids and grandkids and stuff to do, and I'm sure I'll get my feet underneath me. So I have an interest, obviously, in the med school. I'm still on that board. I just joined the board of Project Access, so healthcare is clearly important to me. I think I'm going to choose what I do next more carefully because I have a limited time to help. So I don't know, Victor. I knew you'd ask me that, but I don't have an answer.
So, is there anything that you haven't done in your life that you would like to do now? That you've looked back on your life and you've seen, you know, what life is all about? Missing your husband.
I don't think there was anything we didn't do that we wanted to do. We lived our lives the way we wanted to live it. I am doing more things that I do as hobbies now because I'm trying to keep structure in my life. I'm started to take piano lessons again. I studied classical piano all through high school and college. I have a wonderful piano teacher at WSU, and reading a lot more. So I don't know. I'm sort of in an unusual. I have always known what I was going to do, and always structured my time, and I don't know. But God willing, I have some more years left, and I will certainly contribute to the community in some way, and hopefully to the state of Kansas. And I just need to get to tomorrow right now.
All right. And what lessons?
And not melt down on public TV.
And what lessons do you plan to take with you tomorrow?
You know, Tom is sort of deeply embedded in me. We were together for so many years. I think if I had
Since 16.
if I had predeceased Tom, he probably would have said the same thing. So he's my mentor. He's given me strength when I didn't have it. I think he thought I was way more qualified than I thought I was. So he gave me confidence to go forward at both business and politics and the stuff we've done. So and I've had 45 years of that, whereas many, many people don't ever get that or don't get that many years. So that foundation is firmly inside me. I hope to mentor not only our kids and grandkids, but I have a lot of little folks and big folks in the community. I will continue to mentor and just be a cheerleader for the next generation of Kansans.
Define for our viewers, who is Jill Docking?
You know, at the heart of it, the focus that we have as a family is what every family's had. I mean, Tom and I were focused first on our family. So I'd say I'm a wife and a mother. I hope I'm a good businesswoman and a community activist. So I don't know, I'm just part of the group trying to pitch in at this point. I think we are extraordinarily blessed to live in the United States of America, but we have to keep investing in it. And in some ways, I guess I get that ethic because I'm from an immigrant family, so I don't really take for granted that that's a given. I used to laugh with Tom, whose family went to University of Kansas for, 5 or 6 generations. I said to him, my family was probably pulling the ox in Poland in the fields. So I think when you're fairly new, which in a way I have been, even though my grandparents came here in the early 20th century, you appreciate what you have. And if you don't contribute, shame on you. We can all contribute, maybe some less than others. Everybody's got lots of stuff on their plate. But.
That's right. So by which philosophy do you live by today?
I think everybody should be family focused because that's your big job is to raise a family together. But then I hope everybody feels like they owe an obligation to our community and our state and our national government too. So I just think insofar as you can, it's your job to pitch in and for sure to vote and for sure to be active in politics. And I think it's only people that get old and crabby that think this next generation isn't doing their job. I think they're great. I mean, I see a lot of energy with that generation. But I believe in the moral obligation also of the United States of America. I mean, I think we've played an important role in the movement of this world to better and better things. And there are extraordinary philanthropists in the United States of America, like the Gates Foundation, that's done incredible work in Africa. So I hope we maintain our moral leadership. I think it's what everybody's dad and grandfather would have wanted them to do, and mom and grandmother. So I guess that's my philosophy. I don't know that there's a name for it.
Well, on that note, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you.
For joining us. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
And again, my condolence on your husband.
Thank you, Victor.
And thank you for watching this edition of One-on-One. Be sure to send your questions or comments to oneonone@kpts.org. You can also watch past episodes of this program at kpts.org. I'm Victor Hogstrom. We'll see you again soon for another edition of One-on-One.
The preceding program was brought to you by TZ Productions, supporting KPTS and the communities it serves in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
Support also comes from viewers like you. Thank you.